Hi there and welcome to Planet Coaster. So, the Tunnel of Love ride I made recently, some people have asked how I did it. Well, there was a fair bit of planning involved, I won't lie, and the whole build took around 120 hours. So, since a couple of you have asked how I did it, I figured I'd do a quick video explaining how it all fit together. Peek behind the curtain, or, well, basically, I'll show you how the sausages were made, so to speak. Now, building a ride of this scale, it typically starts with an idea I have in my head. So it might seem a bit backwards, but for me, what brings a plan like this together foremost is finding the right music. So even before I start building, I was sourcing music that fits. For me, the music is a big part of the overall experience, so that's what I tackle first. Now, I get most of the music I use on YouTube from Epidemic Sound, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a subscription-based royalty-free music library, and that costs me about £10 a month, but it's totally worth it to me. There's a bit more variety than what you get with the YouTube audio library, and it saves me a heap of time looking for other royalty-free music. The best thing for me with Epidemic is that you can download the music stems as separate files, so have individual sound files for like the melody, vocals, instruments and whatnot, and that's really useful when editing and mixing for games like Planet Coaster. So basically that's what I did for this ride. I found the music I wanted, spent an evening doing some audio mixing for it, then imported the sound file into the game and loaded it as custom music for the ride. So when people comment about timing of music matching the ride, honestly, the reason for that is that the music came first. I'll load a custom file into the ride and then use that to build a track around the music. It takes a while because you're constantly building a little bit, then testing to make sure it all lines up, redo if it doesn't, and then add a little bit more track, test again, and so on. So with the track, I knew I wanted to use pitch black visual effects on the ride. And that means having to build underground, because if you build a ground level, you can never achieve pitch black even at night. So to make that a little easier, I excavated a massive hole covering most of the buildable area so I could see what I was doing. Now, once the track was built, I filled that back in with the flattened terrain tool so it was all underground again. I mean, that took a couple of days, but once it was all in place and I was sure everything was lined up right, it was basically a case of building the theming up around the track. So I started off with the above ground section, and I spent altogether far too long building the ride station, considering I didn't even use this in the video. Now, when I have my YouTube head on, I know I spend far too long working on stuff that won't even make it into the video, but I find it hard to leave something exposed or half done, even if I know it won't be seen. There's bits of this unfinished, and it was quite hard to walk away from that without completing them, but I have to draw the line somewhere. Anyway, moving on. So, there's a lot of ThemeMaker's toolkit items and a couple of Steam Workshop items that I've used in this build. First up is the Etterling Frog, and that's a TMTK asset created by Kashira. Now, this is a great asset, highly detailed, and it's really colourful and bright, so I did want to use it in my build. Next up is these bears. Now, this is a Steam Workshop item created out of the art shapes. I've adapted these from the ferocious teddy bear created by Sea Strife, and that saved me a heap of time trying to create these from scratch. Now, these hearts that are with the bears, this is an awesome TMTK asset created by Willowbix. They come in 3 sizes, and honestly, I couldn't have built this ride without them. Oh, by the way, I'm leaving links to all of these assets that I've used in the description of this video, so if you want to use them yourself, go check out the links and that'll take you to the Steam Workshop. So, moving on. Now, next up, these little bunny rabbits, they're a art shape workshop asset by J. Tompkinson. And again, I thought they fit really well with this part of the ride, so I've just added a few little bits of the giant vegetables here, which I think worked really well. Now, as we get to the carousel, these teddy bears here, they're a TMTK asset created by Rexcube, and I know they're meant to be used in a gift shop, but I thought it might be funny if I have these little teddy bears doing stuff like riding the carousel, which I thought looked pretty cute myself. Okay, I think everything after the teddy bears for the ground level section of this ride, that's all my own work. So let's venture inside. Now, I'm going to leave the time set to daylight, so that should help us see a bit clearer. And I can turn on the mouse pointer light with L. That's actually a handy tip. So if you're building in the dark, press the L key on your keyboard and that'll illuminate it with a flashlight to help you build. Very useful. So let's see inside. Yeah, so the fake tunnel entrance back there, I rebuilt and modelled that about 15 times before I was happy with this. I mean, at one point I had signs down there. I built it up with a load of love hearts. I even opened the corridor out here at one point, but that all kind of distracted from the main focal point, which is obviously the fake door that leads you down a different path. So let's see inside there. Now, can I remember which one is the fake wall? Let's see. Yep, here we are. So now, you'll notice that it's pitch black in here, even though we're not below ground yet. Now, I achieved that effect using the blackout dark ride panel, and that's another TMTK dark ride asset created by JCat. The blackout panel is pure black and has zero reflection, making it ideal to create those dark rides, because it blocks out the light of illuminated assets as well. Now this asset, this has also been instrumental to the build. I've used this extensively underground too, to block out the view of each section of the ride, as I'll demonstrate when we get in there. Okay, so let's head down then. So, the fairy section. Now, these little models are a TMTK asset created by Sample Rocket, and these are absolutely amazing. I've never seen anything like this, and I absolutely had to use this in my build. I colour coded this room based on these assets to match the bright pink and purple colours. Luckily, there's a couple of plants in the base game that you're able to change the colour of, hence I've got this quite trippy pink-purple combination going on here. I think these are actually sunflowers. Yeah, they're sunflowers. And this is, let me see what this is. Yep, climbing roses. So, I think it all worked pretty well down here. I guess let's move on. So, the round portal asset here, that's another TMTK workshop item by Gab. Again, a great asset for dark rides, and I've used this quite a bit throughout my build. Through the wormhole type thing here, see, I created this using art shapes myself, and it's the curved cylinder shape that I've used, just with lights illuminating it in wonderful ways. And if I go outside and you see it from the side, yeah, it doesn't look as great, does it? But if you're travelling straight through the middle on a ride POV, it obviously looks quite weird and wonderful. Now, from this angle, you can also see how I've used the blackout panels to block out the light from other sections of the ride here. So yeah, in the cold light of day, you can see there's a lot of this panel stuff going on, and it did take me forever to have to put these out everywhere to block out the light where I didn't want you to see it. But it works, and it's quite effective. Let's move on. So the sign here, actually the large signs that I've used everywhere, I made these by making a picture of the words in Illustrator and importing that into the game, putting it on the biggest in-game projection screen I could find, which I think is the 32-meter one. Then what I'd do is trace over that with the art shapes and use the light up panels behind it, because these colourable light up panels, they're fantastic for dark rides if you know how to use them. Similarly to the blackout panel, light doesn't penetrate through these and they don't create a reflection themselves. They're just basically a block colour in the dark. So I've used these quite a lot for creating bold lettering in the build. Right, so let's move on, or this will take forever. So this section with the dance floor. To get into this room, I've used the blackout panel shift animatronic, and that's another TMTK asset by JCat. This is a great asset to transition into a new scene and making sure the audience doesn't see that scene before you want them to. You just have to program it into the trigger sequence so that it drops down right at the very last minute. Okay, so let's take a look in this room. So this very bright room, I nicknamed this the disco floor. And in here, the wall panels are screens loaded with silhouette images that are created in Illustrator and then imported into the game. The lettering panels on the wall here, that's another TMTK asset created by Sir Maverick34. So if you go on the Steam Workshop, you can download every letter in this typeface, which is great. Now, further back here, you get to our second set of dancers. And if you had to guess, yeah, you guessed right, that's another TMTK asset created by Sample Rocker. He has done a variety of dancers and animatronics, so I did use a fair few of them in this build. The little neon hearts here are also a TMTK asset created by Hydro. So I wasn't kidding when I said I used a lot of TMTK asset to create this build. Now, the roof of this section, this took a while for me to build, and that's created using the colourable lit panels again, alternating pink and black. I did have to go back and cover a lot of this in the blackout panel to stop it showing up all over the place. So, moving on. Now, this is officially where the ride starts getting a little bit weird. And moving eyes and lips here. Well, these are little videos I created in After Effects, and then I imported them into the game and put them on a big screen. The neon lettering here, that's a TMTK asset created by Fun for Wolf. And the mouth image here, now I created that the same way I did the big lettering. I developed an image in Adobe Illustrator, then loaded that into a big screen in the game, and then traced around it with the art shapes and those colourable panels. So when it's completely dark in here, it looks a little better. Although I'm not entirely happy with what I created here. I think the original design I did in Illustrator was a little sloppy, but, you know, I can't really change that now, and I think it portrayed the idea of trying to get across here. Right, moving on through the first lift hill. Now, the fire section, the lettering back here, I created the same way as the lettering before. And as I've said before, using a lot of these blackout panels to hide what was going on over here. Now, a fun fact, the flames that follow around the track here, I had to set up a little display sequencer for these things, and there are 74 of these blooming fire things, which meant I had to manually key in the trigger sequence for each one. That was a fun afternoon, all in the name of art, eh? Now, down this section, the flame video here, again, I created that in Adobe After Effects. Well, actually, I'm not that great with After Effects, so credit where credit's due. I watched a YouTube tutorial on how to create the fire effect and just made a video based on that tutorial. Now this section of the track, transitioning from the flames into this loop, this gave me the most trouble of the entire build. I think I redid this section at least 7 or 8 times, working on different ideas before I came up with something that I was happy with. Sometimes building something in Planet Coaster is just a case of trial and error until you come up with something that you think you like. Anyway, moving on. So, Heart's Desire, yeah, the lettering I created with the panel technique that I've used before, with the addition of these neon dots, which again are a TMTK asset created by Fun for Wolf. And then onto the Beating Heartbeat videos. Again, this is a video I created with Illustrator and After Effects, importing this into the game. So I think this is a really good part of the ride in the dark. It looks great, but it's actually really easy to create if you import your own video in. Right, let's navigate our way down here. Now, this is probably the trippiest section of the track. See, I discovered that with using the light up panels, anything in front of them in darkness turns into a silhouette. So I made use of that, turning these Western Showgirl assets by Sample Rocker into dancing silhouettes. And, you know, this is what they look like in the cold light of day. Still great assets, but turning them into a silhouette just turned up the weirdness a notch for me. This takes you into this neon tube section. And again, you can find these tubes on the TMTK workshop by Fun for Wolf. Now, the neon chain assets here, they're a different TMTK item created by Lilybat, and I have so many ideas of stuff I want to do with these tubes, maybe for my next build. Anyway, moving on. So this street scene, I love how this came out. I created some of these buildings myself, and others I adapted from the street scene blueprints created for the Ghostbusters pack. I think all of it comes together rather well, although it did take me like an entire day to build it. Now, around this corner here, the billboard image I've got here, originally I created a 15-second video in After Effects to go in this section, but it was absolutely tanking the frame rate. So much so that the music on the ride was desyncing with the train too much, so I had to bin that and just go with a static billboard, unfortunately. Luckily, I didn't seem to have too much issue with the rest of the build affecting the frame rate. It just seemed to be that one video that was really bad for it. Right, and if we work our way to the top of this lift hill, now in here I've used a Starfield panel, and I was convinced that this was an asset I'd downloaded, but it shows up in the original scenery pieces, not in the TMTK or the workshop blueprints, so I guess it's something that's always been there and I've just missed it. Either way, I think this is a great piece and I'll likely be using this more often. Now, the shooting stars here, to get that effect, under the track here, I've got two special effects set up with the glowing drops. If you point them horizontally, then they create this great effect that looks like shooting stars. So, moving on. Now, the rainbow room, as I've decided to call it, I created this using light panels again. I've really overused these light panels in this build. In fact, for this section, I think there's around 5,000 panels, in fact. I mean, I basically created a giant box around the track, and I had to build this above ground because it was just physically impossible to be building this underground. So I took this above ground, marked out where the track was, and then built a giant box around it and then sunk it back under the ground. This section is also encased on the outside with the blackout panels so you can't see the light panels inside. Now, that was a lot of work. Okay, so inside here, I really wanted to have the hot air balloons taking off as the ride raced around on the track here, but it seems when the balloons take off, it's unpredictable and I didn't want them blocking the view, so I decided to leave them static in the end. Now, the gender symbols, they're just made out of the art shapes in-game with different coloured light behind them. So it was a little bit of work, but quite easy to do. So with this section of the track, I wanted to give this room a sense of infinity, but unfortunately there's a section over here where I had to block it off at an angle because some of the track further up was sticking out, and that put paid to that idea. So I mean, I think it still works in principle. It does look like it goes on forever, aside from this corner which I had to have the harsh angle at. I also added track support to this section of the track too, to give a sense of the scale. Now, normally I turn that off, especially in these sort of fantasy rides where you don't really need it to be looking too realistic, but I felt it was needed here for the sense of scale. So, moving on. Now, through this door, you come into the neon circular tubes, and that's another TMTK asset created by Artificial Artist. And I really wanted to do more with these tubes because I think they're really great and they're good for giving a sense of depth, especially when you put them close together, but I struggle to fit them in. They're quite rigid in where they can be used because of the break at the bottom, and I understand completely that the break's there for a sense of realism, but it would be great if the neon tube created a perfect circle and went all the way around, which I think they'd be easier to use with that. The bottles in here are just standard Planet Coaster assets, and I used a bright yellow light to get the track to look pure gold here. Then we make our way down to the Love Boat, and again, nothing particularly special here, no special effects apart from the fireworks obviously, and through to the final approach. Now, beyond this, you dropped into this trippy white space for the final lift hill, and I've created this with the light panels again, this time white, and the words appearing along the sides are just images imported onto the big screens. Now, I created this section in this way because I wanted it not to feel like you were going up a lift hill, instead just travelling along a level pace. The extent of the white space here also feels a little bit reality bending. The final corridor you go through here, now this was just a nod to the corridor that you go through at the start, kind of like you've gone full circle, and so I just copied and pasted it and set it at an angle. And well, that's basically it. That's all the secrets I've got that are revealed now. So the interactive experience with this ride, it's basically a combination of a trick of the light, a heap of TMTK assets, and some trickery with video screens and imported images. So basically a ride anyone could do with a little bit of effort and some imagination, I suppose. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the journey. Please check out the assets that I've listed in the video details section. The people creating workshop items through the thememaker's workshop, they're the real heroes and deserve a heap of praise for what they're doing here. I've taken a look at the process myself, and it is well beyond my capabilities to create custom assets in that way, so they definitely deserve way more praise than they ever get. And on that note, that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed the journey, and feel free to ask any questions about the process and I'll answer best I can. If you've made it all the way to the end of the video, because I mean, I have rambled on for like 20 minutes here, didn't expect it to go on that long. But anyway, I just want to say thanks for watching and bye for now.